When we think of the Mahabharata, we often think of great wars, divine weapons, and cosmic debates. But before the clashing of armies, the story of the Mahabharata opens in a quiet moral storm, a curse born not from kings or gods, but from the tears of a dog, tears of a mother dog. It begins with Janamejaya, who is actually the great-grandson of Arjuna. He's performing a grand sacrifice at Kurukshetra, the same field that once drank the blood of his ancestors. The ritual is perfect, the offerings are precise, and then enters a puppy, a cute little puppy, a male puppy, a small creature of Sarama, the divine hound who guards cosmic truth. And just like that, the sacred is interrupted by the innocent. Notice that's actually what is happening in the Mahabharata here. The sacred is interrupted by the innocent. When the brothers strike the puppy, something subtle shatters. The story forces us to ask, how sacred can a ritual be if it hurts the harmless? Sarama's arrival is astonishing. A goddess does not thunder with power. She asks a question. Why was my son struck? When there is silence, she curses. Misfortune shall befall you unexpectedly. Right? The curse is introduced right at the beginning of the episode that I published earlier this week for part 3 of the Mahabharata. So this moment is the seed. The curse is the seed of the serpent sacrifice that is to come. Janamajaya's later obsession with revenge, with Takshaka, right? Takshaka begins not from his father's death, but from this exact moment of moral blindness. That's something that a lot of readers of the Mahabharata do not realize. Sarama's curse is not merely divine retribution. It's the voice of karma correcting arrogance. It's the reminder that purity in ritual means nothing if the heart has not learned compassion and other lessons that it needs to. If the human heart has not learned the lessons that it needs to, all the rituals that you can do for God mean nothing. Spiritually, the scene here teaches us that the universe watches not your fire, but your tenderness. In our postmodern world, this really does echo how many religious people, including those who run religious organizations, pursue success or spirituality while neglecting empathy, right? They don't, there's something incorrect about, some of the things that religious organizations engage in. So every unjust act, no matter how small it is, ripples into destiny because it will have an impact on some other conscious being. Just like, her puppy being struck caused Sarama to be irritated. And she put out a curse. She put out this hope, this wish, this curse unto Janamejaya and his brothers, his bloodline. Why does this happen ultimately? It's because the divine realm, as I explain it, which is actually intelligence, as I explain it in my book, Who God Really Is, which I encourage all of you to pick up on Amazon today, the divine realm observes through the eyes of the voiceless. That's the test, right? Through the eyes of the voiceless. It reminds me of that very popular quote of Mahatma Gandhi as well. Something along the lines of, you can tell a lot about a nation by the way it takes care or does not take care of its animals. Janamejaya and his brothers are conducting a grand sacrificial ritual at Kurukshetra, a place steeped in spiritual significance, when that puppy belonging to Sarama, the divine she-dog, is struck, right, by Janamajaya's brothers. The puppy is innocent here. It flees to its mother, right, who confronts these princes with fury. Now, here is where her fury is righteous. There is sometimes a place for anger, in various circumstances, and it's okay. Sarama isn't just a dog. She's not a dog. She's a divine entity, a guardian of cosmic justice. In Vedic mythology, Sarama is linked to the dawn, a symbol of truth and illumination. Her puppy represents innocence, and the brother's violence against it disrupts dharma, harmony, the cosmic order. The way everything should be, the way everything should flow is disrupted. The curse that Sarama pronounces isn't petty vengeance. It's a recalibration of balance. Spiritually, this suggests, again, that no act, however small it is, escapes the universe's ledger. There is some sort of ledger here, right? So we humans are building this blockchain ledger on Earth, but there's a spiritual ledger in existence as well. That's been with us for since the beginning of all beginnings, as I indicate and as I explain in my book, Who God Really Is. The ghee, sacred clarified butter, symbolizes purity and offering to the divine. By striking the puppy, the brothers symbolically taint their ritual, inviting misfortune. The puppy did not even look toward the ghee. It did not even pounce on the ghee or try to aim for it, try to gain it. At least that's what the puppy tells his mother, Sarama. And yet the puppy was struck. In many spiritual traditions, harm to the innocent, even if it's something minor as a puppy, as a tiny puppy, it ripples. It has an effect on the moral fabric of the world. Now imagine Sarama as the embodiment of the Earth's sentience, a Gaia-like figure. The puppy could symbolize vulnerable ecosystems. Think here about endangered species or fragile habitats. Janamajaya's brother's thoughtless act mirrors humanity's often reckless treatment of its most valuable surroundings, natural surroundings. Just think about all the chemistry and medicine that we are able to produce because of what's been offered to us by God, what has been allowed to come into creation by God in the plant kingdom, right? So Sarama's curse becomes the planet's warning. Harm the innocent and consequences will eventually find you. Not through magic, but through the natural fallout of imbalance, through the natural imbalance that is put into effect. Resource depletion. This perspective invites us to see the Mahabharata also as an ecological parable, where divine justice mirrors the self-regulating systems of our world. The scene that I introduced to you from the Mahabharata in earlier this week, right? In the episode from earlier this week about this story, featuring the story, that early scene screams leadership accountability. Janamejaya and his brothers are royalty, wielding power in a sacred context. Striking the puppy reflects a lapse in emotional intelligence and ethical responsibility. Leaders today, whether they are CEOs, politicians, or community figures, can learn from this story. A single thoughtless action, like dismissing a quote-unquote small complaint or ignoring a marginalized voice, can escalate, tarnishing reputations or sparking backlash. Sarama's confrontation is like a whistleblower calling out injustice. Now, Janamejaya, he gets it, because notice, earlier in the episode, earlier this week, Mahabharata number 3 episode, he searches for sages, for priests, right? He starts searching for anyone who can remove the curse. He understands something wrong has been done. Janamejaya gets it. It's kind of like, in our modern world, some leader scrambling to mitigate a PR disaster. But the lesson is always clear. You have to try to prevent harm before it spirals, right? You want to try to not bring stress into your life that you don't need to, that could have been prevented. Life is stressful enough anyways. Otherwise, we would have no reason to even participate in spiritual rituals, worship rituals, the kind of, sacrificial rituals that even Janamejaya and his brothers are participating in, at least in his time, for his time. Janamejaya, terrified of the curse, seeks absolution. This begins his long search for priests, spiritual authority figures who can undo his karma. Here enters Somashrava, the priest born of a serpent mother, who is actually a hybrid of ascetic wisdom and serpentine instinct. Okay? Ascetic wisdom and serpentine instinct. Those are actually two very valuable characteristics to have or to be marked by, even in our postmodern world, which is, let's be honest, not paradise, right? We're not living with only goodness surrounding us. Somashrava's father warns, he can absolve you of all sins except those against Shiva, Lord Shiva. Now, why Lord Shiva? Because Shiva is the witness of cosmic justice, the one who transforms poison into power. And sin against him means sin against transformation or change itself. It means the refusal to change. And that is against the fundamental framework or design of all of existence, including the universe. As I state in my book and as I explain in detail, very clearly, in easy to understand terms in my book, Who God Really Is, which I encourage you all to pick up on Amazon today. Change cannot be breached, meaning that you can refuse to change, but it does not mean that you will be able to overcome the phenomenon of change. Somashrava's condition, that he will grant any request made by a Brahmin, is a spiritual metaphor. It tells us even divine wisdom, when bound by unthinkable obedience, becomes dangerous. The test of spirituality is discernment, not rule following. Okay, it's discernment, not rule following. Too many people pray to God, worship God, go to temples and all different kinds of houses of worship to obey, to follow the rules, to obey, to tell God I'm going to be obedient. But Hinduism is powerful in that it teaches us we have to become one with who we seek to follow or be obedient to. We have to be like him or her, right? In the case of Durga Devi. But essentially God, we have to be like God. We have to be more like God, meaning our own being must reflect God. And God is, of course, a wise judge. Discernment is part of his name, let's put it like that. Discernment defines one of his characteristics. So the test of spirituality is not following the rules and saying I'm going to be obedient to this rule and be obedient to this ritual and this timing and the timing of the moon and the timing of this ritual and what the Hindu scriptures state. It's about it's really about a discernment, or at least having that quality of wisdom, discernment, as part of your own being, natural to you, like second nature to you almost, right? Janamejaya accepts Somashrava's condition, and with this choice he invites both salvation and danger into his kingdom. For every bargain with power carries a shadow. Okay? Every bargain with power carries a shadow. Somashrava's origin story is actually quite wild. He was born of a serpent woman. He embodies a bridge between human and divine realms. In Hindu spirituality, Nagas or serpents symbolize primal energy, the Kundalini, and the mysteries of creation. His birth via ascetic potency suggests that spiritual power transcends conventional morality or biology. His flaw, unquestioning obedience to the Brahmins, reflects the tension between blind devotion and discernment. Spiritually, again, how do we balance? We're being called, or we're being asked here, how do we balance surrender to higher authority, to a higher intelligence, as I explain in my book, Who God Really Is, with critical thinking? Of course, I explain it all in my book, so it's a very easy question to answer if you read my book. But here, just from the Mahabharata, this very ancient spiritual text, we understand that Somashrava's role as a purifier points to the limits of even divine intervention. Some transgressions, like those if they are against Lord Shiva, are beyond absolution, okay? Even he is limited because he is not God himself. He is not God himself as one-to-one. He is like God, we can say, but not God himself. And I explain the importance of acquiring a greater and greater resemblance to the nature of God in my book, Who God Really Is, which when accomplished actually does not cause us to become God. Therefore, we are always limited. Now, picture Somashrava. Just picture him as an AI program with immense knowledge, but a hard-coded directive to obey certain users, like the Brahmins. Janamejaya hiring him is like a CEO deploying a powerful algorithm to solve a crisis, knowing that it has a glitch that could be exploited. This raises questions about trust in systems, be it priests or tech, be it, spiritual systems or tech, modern tech. If Somashrava's flaw is his blind obedience, what happens when AI blindly follows flawed human commands or reasoning? This ancient Mahabharata tale feels eerily relevant to debates about AI ethics, where when they are unchecked, like unchecked power or code, can amplify human biases and really lead to tragic consequences. Janamejaya's choice of Somashrava is a calculated risk. He's hiring a specialist with a known quirk, much like when a company might hire a brilliant but eccentric consultant. The condition is, of course, Somashrava's obedience to Brahmins. That mirrors, and it really does mirror, real-world scenarios where talent becomes baggage, right? Like a star employee with a tendency to overpromise. Later on in the story, we see that Janamejaya's success in conquering Takshashila suggests that embracing imperfect allies can yield results, but only if you manage their quirks, right? Somashrava was highly obedient to Brahmins, but he had that limitation as well with he cannot breach a sin committed against Lord Shiva and absolve it, with some magic wand or something like that, right? He cannot do that. But he's overly giving by being so obedient to anything the Brahmins want. Now, Janamejaya was successful later on in conquering Takshashila, suggesting that, his decision to use Somashrava ends up down the road producing good results for him. But Janamejaya had to be very careful, right? Especially he did not want to commit any sin against Lord Shiva. He wouldn't want to do that because that's not something that Somashrava can clear. So this king, Janamejaya's, whole part in these early scenes of the Mahabharata is it's quite fascinating. Really does reflect to us the way we see CEOs, modern, postmodern world CEOs, tech CEOs, managing the complexities, the conditions, the complexities of the modern corporate world. You've got to know your people's strengths and flaws and set clear boundaries to harness their potential. Now, the Mahabharata features this sort of school of life that is run by sage Ayodha Domya and his 3 disciples, Aruni, Upamanyu and Veda. These stories are miniature Upanishads in the Mahabharata, teaching through lived obedience, suffering, and moral awakening. Aruni is asked to repair a water channel. Unable to fix it, he lies down in the ditch to block the flow with his body. He becomes the bridge, literally merging with the element he serves. When called by his master, he rises, reborn as Udalaka. This moment whispers a profound truth. True service dissolves the ego until nature itself flows through you. In our real world, Aruni's act resembles those moments when one sacrifices comfort or pride for integrity, like a teacher working late, or a parent holding the line of truth, or a healer staying up through the night to service a client. When the self forgets itself, the divine current moves again, because it's always within the scope of service, within the scope of helping others, within the scope of some form of sacrifice. Upamanyu's test is more subtle. It's hunger. Ayodhya strips away every form of sustenance from him. Alms, milk, even the froth from the calf's mouth of the milk that the calves have drunk from the mother cow, right? Starving, Upamanyu eats poisonous arka leaves, and he's blinded, falling into a well, right? Both literally and symbolically. He's kind of spiraling down into a well, both literally and symbolically. His blindness is the blindness of the seeker, the loss of worldly sight before inner sight awakens. The Ashwin twins appear offering divine nourishment, but Upamanyu refuses until his master permits him to accept that nourishment. Obedience here is not submission, it is alignment. That's actually what is trying to come through to the scene in the Mahabharata. Upamanyu is saying, I will not taste heaven if my guru is left behind. The Ashwin twins are impressed. That's why they are impressed. So they restore his sight and grant him golden teeth, which are all symbols of illumination through discipline. Through Upamanyu's story, we see bhakti meeting tapasya, devotion fused with endurance, with strength. Upamanyu's story is about integrity in isolation, staying true even when unseen, unacknowledged, or deprived. You've got to stay true even when you feel unseen, unacknowledged, or deprived. You've got to stay true to integrity. Don't take, criminal or quick, easy shortcuts to try to escape that scarcity, state or condition of scarcity. The spiritual path does not first open the eyes. It first takes away what, you crave to see. Now, Ayodhya third disciple's story is interesting. Veda. Veda endures silent service. He doesn't complain. Through hardship, he becomes a gentle teacher, one who does not test his own students harshly. In Veda, we see the alchemy of suffering. Pain, when digested, becomes compassion. When digested. Every master is shaped not by what they've learned, but by how they've been broken and mended. This section of the episode of Naked Hindu Tales from earlier this week, it's a masterclass in Guru Shishya, teacher-student dynamics, which are a cornerstone. They really are a cornerstone of Hindu spirituality. The disciples' trials here aren't just tasks. They're alchemical processes, burning away ego to reveal inner wisdom. They're very dynamic. Aruni's act of lying in the ditch symbolizes surrender to duty, merging with the earth to serve a greater purpose. Upamanyu's blindness and restoration by the Ashwins, divine healers, reflects the spiritual journey. Suffering leads to insight when guided by faith, or when you stay true, when you just stay true, and you don't take a shortcut, or you don't engage in a criminal act despite hardship and scarcity, always you will arrive at something good. Always you will be blessed later on. He was blessed, Upamanyu was blessed with gold teeth, gold. And Veda's endurance without complaint embodies karma yoga, selfless action. The Vedas and Dharma Shastras shining in them signify enlightenment, signify that they have become beacons of light. They are walking, talking beacons of light, of divine light, which is actually has no relation to visible light or the, visible light rainbow spectrum, as I explain in my book, Who God Really Is, which I encourage you all to read on Amazon. Grab your copy from Amazon and start reading today. It's an excellent book to understand reality as it is and yourself. The disciples are like the hero archetype of Jungian or Carl Jung, philosophy. Facing the shadow, they face their limitations in the wilderness of trials. Ayodhya is the wise old man, guiding them through tests that forge their individuation, the process of becoming whole. Upamanyu's blindness is again a literal and metaphorical descent into depression, into darkness. It's a classic dark night of the soul. The Ashwins as divine physicians are like the self archetype, restoring balance. This perspective frames the story, right? The Carl Jung perspective, the Jungian archetypes frame the story in the Mahabharata, in this early chapter early section, as a universal quest for self-discovery, where external obedience to a guru mirrors the inner work of aligning with one's higher self. So here is where it is sometimes necessary for us to understand when obedience is valuable. In the scene of King Janamajaya's sacrificial ritual, no fruits come about for obedience to a ritual when an innocent is harmed. His obedience and his brother's obedience to the ritual, sure, it's great, but if it involves hurting the innocent, there's nothing great to be gained from it, because that kind of obedience reflects still a blind spot in intelligence, something lacking in intelligence, a lack of wisdom there. Whereas the obedience in the stories of Ayodhya and his 3 disciples involves wisdom. Very much so, wisdom is integrated with the obedient acts. And through this ancient, Mahabharata scene, we can see these trials of the 3 disciples resemble the grind of mentorship and personal growth. Aruni's ditch lying is like an intern pulling an all-nighter to fix a crisis, proving loyalty under pressure. Upamanyu's missteps, begging twice, sipping milk, all of that, taking what he shouldn't be taking from others, mirror a young professional learning workforce ethics through trial and error, and through, his boss teaching him what is right and what is wrong. Veda's endurance reflects the quiet resilience needed in toxic work environments or rigorous training programs. The guru's blessings are like a mentor's endorsement, opening doors to even greater success. But of course, here it's about personal success, right? In the Mahabharata itself. These scenes with these 3 disciples of Ayodhya, they teach us that growth often comes through discomfort, but only if we learn from that discomfort and stay committed to the right path. Veda's disciple Utanka inherits the torch, and his story shifts the tone of the Mahabharata section from ashram humility to mythic adventure. He is asked to bring earrings from Queen Portia for Veda's wife, a seemingly simple errand that spirals into cosmic revelation. On his path, Utanka meets a mysterious man on a bull who tells him to drink dung and urine. It's really a shocking image. Believe me, when I read it for the first time, I was pretty shocked. But he obeys. Utanka obeys, later discovering that it was divine nectar, Amrita. And you often have this happening in Hindu mythology where these, characters pop out of nowhere and they are disguised. They're often like divine beings disguised as abnormal, kind of weird or wandering creatures or wandering humans. It's fascinating. Now, the lesson here does pierce through logic. What seems impure in the world may hide the essence of goodness or immortality even. Utanka's reaction is not to display like a nasty disgust, right? He doesn't display any mean faces or disgusted faces. He doesn't put judgment upon this mysterious man who asks him or tells him to drink the waste, right, of a cow, I believe, the waste of a cow. So Utanka doesn't do that. Now, we humans would. I mean, even I, reading it for the first time, was like, oh, ew. But Utanka doesn't do that. And that's where, that's what God wants us to realize from this scene, this bizarre scene, is that Utanka's response is not to place all these like judgments immediately upon this mysterious man that we would do in our world, right, today. The sacred often wears the mask of the profane, because in even the profane, there is a test for us, a test of our spirituality, a test of how much we resemble God. Spiritual maturity is learning to recognize divinity, and it's learning to recognize how we must respond with more of a divine nature rather than, well, let's put it, a lower human nature. At Posya's palace, Utanka's inner purity is tested through external cleanliness, ablutions, direction, precision. The story reaffirms the body mirrors the mind. Purification is a discipline of both. It's a discipline of the mind and the body. Please remember to leave a rating or review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. I really appreciate your rating or review for this podcast, Naked Hindu Tales. Then this scene in the Mahabharata ignites into full-on myth. Takshaka, the serpent king, steals the earrings, Queen Posya's earrings. Utanka chases him into the underworld, aided by demigod Indra and Agni. Cosmic forces ultimately of courage and purification. There, Utanka sees the wheel of 12 months, the weaving of time, and the horse of fire. It's almost like he's seeing these secrets, right? It's not a spectacle. This is not like a circus spectacle or something he's viewing. It's metaphysical secrets. He sees the machinery of existence. Time as fabric, elements as tools, divinity as rhythm. It reminds me a lot of what I write about in my book, Who God Really Is, when I explain the fabric of consciousness and that of intelligence, and that time itself is just a human construct. Time is in fact a affixation onto the continuous presence. Do read my book, Who God Really Is. Now, Utanka, despite seeing all these, metaphysical secrets, so to speak, he's driven to get the earrings back from Takshaka. He stays focused on his mission. But Utanka's victory is incomplete. The story ends not with peace, but with revenge reborn. Utanka returns to King Janamejaya, urging the serpent sacrifice, the very fire of destruction that will later draw Vyasa's attention. What began with a curse on a puppy now circles back as a fire for snakes. The wheel turns. Compassion is lost. See, Utanka, he's remaining devoted to what his human master commanded him to do, which is get those earrings. Bring them for my wife, right? And he continues to be devoted to the human voice, the human command. Even when he sees these great spiritual mysteries around him, almost like the fabric of the fundamental framework of the universe as I describe it in my book, Who God Really Is. It's what has God's imprint or fingerprints on it. And he doesn't care for that as much as he should. Instead, he keeps chasing for those earrings. He chases the human command and does not embrace God's fundamental framework of the universe, these mysteries of God, when they are literally staring at him as much as he should. And from the human command, humans being imperfect, we cannot expect peace to be born and continue. Instead, we have revenge being reborn. Utanka's mission to fetch Portia's queen's earrings is a mini epic, right? It's packed with cosmic encounters. It's like he hits literally the jackpot. He does hit the spiritual jackpot. He sees all the secrets of God, God's design, and yet he keeps chasing the earrings because he has to follow, or to him, he chooses to follow the human master's command. Utanka journeys into Nagaloka, aided again, right, by Indra's thunderbolt, demigod Indra's thunderbolt. And it's like a shamanic descent into the underworld. He's confronting chaos, Takshaka, to at least restore order to his life, to his environment that he's known, which is he wants order to remain between himself and his master, Veda, and Veda's wife. Utanka's quest is a case study in mission-driven focus, but also a foolish one, because he doesn't buy into, he doesn't embrace, he doesn't immerse himself in the secrets of God, literally God when they are staring at him. You know, these weaving of time and the seasons and the structure of the universe. Instead, he stays focused on getting those earrings to fulfill his human master's command, ultimately leading to revenge being reborn. Every layer of this section of the Mahabharata mirrors the journey of the human soul. Janamejaya, the ego seeking purification through power. Sarama's puppy, innocence wounded by righteousness. Somashrava, intellect half human, half serpent. Our reason tinged with instinct, right? That's Somashrava for us. Aruni, the self-sacrificing heart. Upamanyu, faith tested through deprivation. Utanka, the seeker who learns that the world's impurities are the universe's disguise. Each figure is a fragment of consciousness, and together they narrate the evolution of spiritual maturity, from ritualistic correctness to compassionate wisdom, and also then ultimately from perfect obedience to imperfection being reborn. That's what we have with Utanka at the end of this section of the Mahabharata, episode 3. And in our postmodern world, these archetypes, they appear daily. When someone justifies cruelty in the name of belief, that's when Janamejaya lives again. When someone holds back judgment to seek truth, that's when Sarama speaks again, or Utanka speaks again to us. When someone endures hardship with trust in higher order, that's Upamanyu's hymns echoing through to us. And so the Posya Parva of the Mahabharata ends with the fire smoldering, the serpent sacrifice yet to begin. But beneath the myth, the Mahabharata whispers a timeless truth. Every curse begins with a wound left unanswered. Every blessing begins with obedience to God, to love. The world, like Utanka's vision, is a wheel spun by invisible hands, of justice, of mercy, and of time. Our task is not to stop it, but to see clearly through its motions. Utanka did not spend enough time doing so. Therefore, revenge was reborn. He became vengeful toward the end of this parva. And perhaps, like Aruni rising from the water's breach, the divine still calls each of us by name, not to test us, but to lift us from the ditch, and to say to us, "You have held the flood long enough. Rise now and flow, escape your suffering. You are free from your suffering." The Posya Parva reminds us that every action ripples through the cosmic order, demanding accountability. It's a map of growth through trials, showing how devotion and resilience forge character. Whether you see Sarama as a divine watchdog, Somashrava as a quirky AI, or Utanka as a cosmic astronaut of some sort who seeks more of science than he does the spiritual cosmos, this story invites us to reflect on our own actions, relationships, and quests. What we value within our quests. Are we judging value correctly? Or are we misjudging how we spend our time correctly, like Utanka did at the end? How do we respond to injustice, by the way? We saw how Sarama, the mother dog, responded to the injustice upon her puppy. We also see how Utanka responded to injustice at the end of the Posya Parva. How do you respond to injustice? How do you balance obedience with discernment? And how do you harness divine or inner strength to overcome chaos? Learn from these stories from the Mahabharata. Continue listening to the Naked Hindu Tales podcast. So thanks for joining me on today's episode. Leave a review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts and ask me any spiritual or non-spiritual question you have there. I'll be sure to answer your question in a future episode for the benefit of all. Thanks for listening, and I'll speak with you in the next episode.